Welcome back to the Oral Wealth, Prosperity, and Practice podcast. In this podcast, we focus on helping guide dental professionals towards financial freedom and towards a fulfilling life. I am Brian Swilling with Navipath Financial, and this is Dr. Jackson Sadler. We're excited to be here today.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Glad to have you with us.
Today, we're going to focus on Jackson's experience with student loans and credit in general. I think it's a misunderstood topic. Would you like to introduce yourself again for the audience? And then we'll go into your story.
Yeah. So hi again, everyone. My name is Jackson Sadler. I am an oral and maxillofacial surgeon practicing in the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area. I have been out in practice for just under 3 years and, just been kind of navigating all the things that go along with private practice. I spent a little bit of time volunteering with a residency program as well, and just kind of figuring out life after school and after residency. And this has been one of the main things that I've been trying to navigate. More broadly, the field of finance in general, but specifically, like Brian was saying, today we're going to talk about debt and just credit in general. So,
no, I mean, I think that is good. Kind of, I run a financial planning practice focused on helping, dental professionals. You are a dental professional, so and our passion, both our passions for financial education is kind of where we ended up today.
Yeah.
So, we got a little bit of background. Let's talk a little bit about kind of what your experience in student loans and how, you kind of approached it.
Yeah. So that is a great question. And I guess when I think about where I would start with that, the first thing that comes to mind is when I found out I had gotten into dental school. Fortunately, I didn't have any undergraduate educational debt, but once I got into dental school, I guess my parents decided, hey, we've done enough to help you out here, and you're responsible for everything moving forward. So once I had been accepted and I started trying to figure out how I was going to pay for everything, I sat down with my dad, who actually happens to be a general dentist. He's retired now. We went through kind of the whole FAFSA process, all the paperwork that goes along with that. And one of my favorite things about that is I remember at some point I asked him how long it took him to pay off his student loans. And he looked me straight in the face and was just like, "Oh, I didn't have any. Dental school was cheap when I went."
Yeah.
So, that's kind of where it started for me. And to be frankly honest with all the listeners, for a while, that's kind of where it ended also, because I had filled out the paperwork. I knew I qualified for it. I started getting the money in my account, which is the most important thing to me at the time. But when you're going through school, you have so many other things to worry about. And if you don't have a background in finance, or at least in my experience, not having a background in finance, I felt like I understood these things because I was talking to my dad about them. He had an understanding of them, and I was kind of learning as I went. But I did not have a very thorough grasp of it. It's honestly just by virtue of the fact that I was able to continue dental school, finish dental school, get out into practice, start making money that was enough to sustain my payments, that everything ended up being okay. But I don't think that a lot of people without a finance background have a very thorough understanding of exactly how their student loans work, all of the repayment strategies, the options, which again, with the current state of things is in a state of flux as well.
Right.
Some of those repayment options are going away. So it's a complicated thing to navigate, and we're not dealing with small amounts of money here.
No.
And unless again you have a background in finance, or you have some unique situation that would result in you having access to significant amounts of money to the tune of hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. You have to learn how to manage these things, and it takes time, and it doesn't happen by osmosis, at least not in my experience.
No, no, and do you even were you even aware of like what kind of student debt you were like, just other than it was government? Yeah,
Well, honestly, to be honest with you, I'm not sure that I did, because I
yeah,
knew that I had student loans. I understood the difference between my student loans. One was going to get one had a higher interest rate than the other, and the options for repayment were more limited with one than the other. So, of course, off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly which ones they were right now, but I do remember specifically at the time I chose one of them over the other for reasons that I cannot recall at the moment.
right, right. But you had multiple options.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah. I believe I had 3 options at the time.
yeah. And were you able to? Did you apply for any other types like grants or other support
So
scholarships?
I had a scholarship through my dental school, but that was it.
Yeah,
And scholarship,
and
you
it
know,
wasn't
wasn't
significant
well.
in
It
your mind. It
helped.
was.
It
Yeah,
helped. Yes, exactly. It was, if I recall, it was maybe a $50,000 scholarship, but in the grand scheme of dental school, I'm estimating here, but my dental school loans, I think, came out somewhere around 220,000 total.
yeah,
Um, and that's the case for most people coming out of dental school. I'm gonna look at my phone. I'm trying not to do this too much, but this is just specifically for a statistic. But this is from a American Dental Education Association study of graduating senior students from dental programs and residencies for this past year, and 80% of students reported of the respondents to the survey reported graduating with some form of educational debt. So, this is far from an issue that only affects a small number of people in this field.
yeah. And I'm sure all the listeners, you know, 80% of the listeners probably
Yeah.
have the same thing. And we from that same study, right? It was the average debt for a dental student graduating was like 312,000.
Yep.
So that's a significant number. And there's like you mentioned, there's different types. There's a few different types of debt. There's the federal direct unsubsidized loans,
Mhm.
and then the federal grad plus loans. There's also it's more rare, but health professional student loans is also an option.
Yep. You
Um,
can also get private loans, bank loans.
yeah,
Yep.
bank loans, which honestly I don't
Yeah, I was
recommend.
going to say a higher interest rate.
Yeah,
Right?
I actually have a buddy, not a dentist, that his parents took out a loan in his name to pay for his student loans or pay for a school
Okay.
from a bank, and did not tell him that they were doing this.
Okay.
And then he came out and didn't realize he had payments due,
Sure.
and it ruined his credit. Like he's still trying to get. So that's a rare occurrence, but that is not a fun one.
Yeah.
That's not a
Yeah. I
fun
bet
one.
not.
What about your after dental school when you decided to go to an oral surgery residence? Like,
Mhm.
tell us what that's like. That's included in the residency
Yeah.
program, right?
Well, so that was a little bit nerve wracking, to be honest with you, because in all dental specialty residency training programs, you don't always get paid.
Yeah,
Right. So there are some people who graduate from dental school with their dental school loans, and then they go on to their residency program that can be anywhere from 1 to 3 years, I think, is the longest ones that don't pay you. But even being in oral surgery in a residency program that did pay me, and they're not paying you a lot of money. It ends up being, very little. And when you start to compare like how much you make per hour, taking into account the number of hours that you're working. but it's not an insignificant amount of money. I want to say when I first started, it was around 50,000, and by the time I finished, it was mid 60,000s
Yeah.
for single person, no kids, nothing like that. So it was manageable. But then you start looking at student loan repayments and how much money they expect you to pay per month. So I actually, for a period of time, I deferred my loans, and then I have income-based repayment after that.
Yeah.
So you're at least making some kind of a dent in them, but it's not very much.
Yeah.
And knowing that that interest is continuing to accrue, and you can't really do a whole lot about it during that period of time is somewhat nerve-wracking. The main thing that kind of, at least in my experience, that got me through was the hope, the
Yeah.
hope and the assertion by your attending surgeons that you're going to make enough money to pay these things off when you get
Right.
finished. And that was the case in dental school as well. So anyone listening in dental school, or in residency, um, this is about managing your money well so that you can pay these things off and manage all your responsibilities, and also not overextend yourself. But it was stressful
Yeah.
when your income is lower than it would be as a practicing dentist.
Right. So you deferred during residency, and then you just applied for the income based repayment. At that point, and that's on your current salary, right? So
Right.
so that can change significantly. And I know a lot of dentists recently, and people probably listening to this, went years without having to re-register, like recertify their income, which I've heard multiple stories where they're literally, their payment wasn't covering their interest. So
Right.
they actually
It keeps
increasing
going
in
up.
value,
Yeah. Keeps going
which
up.
can be nerve wracking, add to the nerve wracking, as you kind of got a better sense of, understanding your student loan situation. Would you ever consider refinancing privately?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and I'm sure everybody, if you haven't graduated yet, don't worry, these things are coming for you. But if you've finished dental school already, then I'm sure you get things in the mail regularly.
Yeah.
From companies like, I'm not going to say any companies' names,
Yeah.
but from various companies trying to get you to refinance your student loans with them. So yeah, and that's a good option. And I guess in certain cases, depending on what your interest rate was initially and what they're offering. Um, but I did not do that. I
Yeah.
didn't refinance through a private company.
Yeah. And that's actually a really good segue on one point I had on, things you can do, right? Like when we were in the lower interest rate environment a few years ago, you know, you could definitely refinance those loans to a lower rate, but then that goes from a federal loan to a private loan. And, you know, what that means is you have no chance for forgiveness. Like, so you're really giving up a lot. So if you're ever considering refinancing your loan, don't do it just because interest rate. Um, like you mentioned, the current state of, the Department of Education and the federal government's view on student loans, we really don't know what's going to happen, right? Could there be forgiveness? Could there not? Um, would there be more favorable, prepayment plans? You know, we don't really know. But if once you refi, you give up any of the options that it could get better in the future.
Sure.
So for a lot of dentists I talk to, I look through all the options and talk about the benefits and drawbacks for each one, but I definitely lean heavy to keeping them federal loans. It just gives more flexibility unless those interest payments are ridiculously high, which most aren't, because interest rates haven't been super high in a while.
Sure.
I mean, they did get high, so maybe people coming out soon, in this current environment, we could have a different analysis or different interpretation.
What do you consider high?
That's a good question. in the way I look at debt, the good kind of debt is for an investment or backed by an asset,
Okay.
right? And I consider student loans an investment. So I consider that's good debt. Student loan I consider is good debt because you're investing in your future. For most of the dental professionals we're talking to, that's a good investment. Some other career choices, not so much, but we won't get into that detail. But you know, it's an opportunity cost, which means like you're you're paying this interest, right? But you might be giving up something else. So
Sure.
what I look at is, and when we talk about like overpaying student loans, right, or paying more than you're required, the opportunity cost that you're giving up is being able to invest that money.
Right. Other things.
And so by default, I think long term, returns in the market are 8 to 10%.
Right.
So if your interest rate is lower than that, you're better off, saving that money.
Sure.
But that completely ignores the psychological side of debt
Of knowing that you have,
bunch of debt.
$312,000 worth of debt hanging over you.
Exactly. So, I have my opinions there, but like, what was your mindset around that debt? Are you a person that said, I need to pay this off as soon as possible? Or are you one of the, like, this is just student loans, it'll get done when it gets done?
So I think I'm somewhere in the middle. I know that doesn't really help with your question. I think I'm somewhere in the middle, and that's mostly because um, I am aware of them. They are something that I feel needs to be addressed in a timely manner. I don't want them hanging over me forever, especially like when I settle down. Wife, kids, all that stuff. Um, but there were some other things that I think were higher priority for me at the time. So some things have superseded getting those paid off. For example, I'm going to say with quotation marks, I purchased a home. I'm paying the bank rent. I'm paying my mortgage every single month for the home that I've purchased.
I mean, I can like in my mindset, I'm kind of have a aggressive view on debt. Like I'm not worried about my mortgage.
Mhm.
I'm not worried about student loans because the student loans because of forgiveness, mortgage because it's backed by the house, right? And as long as you put down some money, like if you didn't put down any money, which a lot of dentists don't do, to buy the house, you
Sure.
could go underwater. So then then it's kind of a different thing. But assuming there's some equity, I don't worry about paying down the mortgage because worst case scenario, you sell the house and it covers it. But if your debt is more than the house, we definitely need to have a conversation. Like it's a different mindset for me.
Absolutely.
Where do you see most people in the spectrum? Are they in the middle? Are they top end? Are they like pay it off immediately? Or are they like, who cares?
You know what I love about that question?
Yeah.
I think that kind of hits on exactly why we're here.
Yeah.
Most of my colleagues and we don't talk about that.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily that it feels like a taboo thing. It's not like I couldn't sit down and be like, oh, hey, what are you doing with your student loans? Have you paid them off? How much you got left? When I was in residency, actually, that was a thing that would come up. Not very often, but it was definitely a discussion I remember having a couple of times.
More often.
Well, at least a few times where with various people where we would just be talking about it like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have $500,000 worth of student loans once I get finished with residency. And that played into the discussion between people's choices to do a 4-year residency and a 6-year residency. 6-year where you go on, you get your MD, and the additional years of medical school you're paying for. Um, which that choice to each their own, but it just kind of does bring into play the debt aspect of things a little bit more, because not only are you continuing to defer your dental school loans, or not paying them off in full, for your based on your income or based on however much excess you would have per month. Now you're adding on to them.
Yeah.
And you're taking 2 more years. So um I mean, it's a thing that was discussed, but it wasn't discussed in detail. It
Right.
wasn't like, hey, this is how I'm paying them off. This is, my plan to get them paid off. Here's how long I'm anticipating it taking me to get them paid off. But I do have a few friends that I remember specifically. They made it kind of their mission. They were like, I'm gonna getting all these paid off within the first 5 years.
Yeah.
And they made a plan and they were able to get that done.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a good point. Like that actually makes me think about one of the points I wanted to bring up. But to go back to the point of the level, like I've seen personally, I've worked with people, close to $1 million.
Sure. Yeah.
Which is like undergrad wasn't paid for, grad school, extended time, maybe they are specialist. And that can be a burden. But to your point on paying it off soon is, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like most dentists think they're going to go out and at one point own a practice.
I think historically that's been the case, but I'm actually glad you said that too. I don't want to derail your point, but that ADIA survey that we were talking about earlier, it actually was pointing to the fact that higher rates of student debt is kind of, they think, influencing a trend towards more graduates not going into ownership or partnership. They're going into associateships, oftentimes with DSOs.
Yeah. I mean, and we could do a whole podcast episode on that.
We will.
But yeah, especially a lot of general practitioners at least they're thinking about starting a practice. And what I've seen actually become an issue when they start looking for a practice is actually these people that really had a really good plan to pay it off early, but did not also save.
Sure.
Right. So when you go to a bank to buy your practice, they give you pretty much 100% financing and they ignore your student loans. That does not count. They do look at the payment for cash flow purposes, but that is different than the way they view other debt. So it's kind of ignored. So what happens is they look for people with liquidity.
Okay.
And ignore student loans. So they're not going to give you a gold star for paying off your student loans faster, but they'll definitely give you a gold star if you have $100,000 in liquid investment, right? So that's savings accounts or actually invested in the market, non-retirement accounts. So the way I advise is if, you just have to know, like whatever your plan is, has to know all the different variables that could like snowball to.
Sure.
And that's the one I've seen come up a lot is bankers always tell me, we don't care about student loans. We just want to know, have they made money and where is all that money? Right. And if it's paid off student loans, that does not help the bank's models to be able to confirm whether you can afford to, borrow 100% on, a $1 million practice.
Right.
So that's another consideration. We've talked about, going private, those loans are counted for a lot of banks.
Okay. So it'll count against any loan that you
because because that is now a competing debt owned by a bank versus a government provided loan. So there's that, and there's the fact that you might not be able to. You might have to go take another year and start saving more, right? So there's all these. There's some nuances there, but absolutely. I think that, we'll talk about this for a little bit, but we'll save a lot of the details for the other. But I think there's two things: the increased debt. I mean, because schooling's just got so much more expensive,
significantly.
Yeah,
there's a whole story behind that I won't get into.
Yeah,
but I don't like it because essentially the short version of the story is, student loans used to be education used to be cheaper. And then the government started providing student loans. And then once some universities realized that more people had access to more money because of these student loans, they increased the tuition and fees to attend their universities. And those numbers have only gone up and have at least from what I've seen, only continued to go up. They kind of stagnate a little bit and fluctuate some, but to your point, they're significantly higher than they were.
Significantly.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, my dad's a dentist also. It's like same thing. It's like you show up, your student loans are insignificant,
Mhm.
compared to what they are now. You just go hang up hang up your shingle and, business starts, right?
Yep.
There's a lot more consideration. And I think, the new generation is also a little less risk averse, mainly because, so there's a little less risk aversion on certain things and more debt. That's a bad combo, which could lead to trends of definitely going to work for somebody else.
Right.
Like, it's a big consideration. So you've been practicing for a few years. Like, you had the mindset when you came out. Like, how has that mindset changed now, if at all?
Specifically towards debt, like
Yeah,
my
student
student loan
debt.
debt.
Yeah, we'll focus on student loans.
To be honest, my mindset is pretty similar to what it was when I finished. I think I could have a little bit more urgency about addressing them, and to be honest, it's been a thing. It's actually in my notes app as a
To-do
to do
list.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. To go back and review all of that stuff just to make sure that I understand it as well as I did the last time I looked
Yeah.
at it. Um,
Have you had to recertify your income yet?
no, they haven't.
Yeah.
They haven't sent
They
me
haven't
anything
requested it.
requesting.
Yeah.
No.
So it's been 3 years. So you just certified did you certify at your previous year's income? So your residency income? So that's
No.
at your
Once I
current
was done,
income,
yeah, my
your
first
current
paycheck.
contract.
Mhm.
Just throwing a stat here, like we talked about, 80% of respondents reported graduating with some form of debt, and that's up from 77% in 2019. 95% of total education debt came from dental school loans, while only 5% came from pre-dental,
Right.
which is similar to your situation. And on average, students finance 67% of their dental education through loans. The remaining 33% was covered by family support, grants and scholarships, personal savings. So it was 17% family support, 11% grants and scholarships. So not a lot of people get grants and scholarships.
Right.
3% personal savings, 1.2 part-time work. Could you imagine working part-time during
Well,
dental
honestly,
school?
no, which is hilarious to me because that's exactly what my dad did. I
Yeah.
think I'm almost positive I remember him telling me he had various jobs. Like I think he told me he was like a line cook or something like
Yeah.
that, just like flipping burgers at a place. And yeah, was between what he made from that and some other support he was able to pay for his dental school.
Yeah.
Didn't need to take out a loan.
Yeah. And I think my dad worked at a lab part-time
Sure.
when he was in dental school, to help subsidize. I guess another way people pay is get U.S. Armed Forces scholarships or
Yep.
or
I had
programs.
several colleagues who did that. Yeah. Is there a good way to get complete repayment?
Yeah, I heard that's really hard to get, though. I heard.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know too much about it, so I don't want to speak on it. But the information's out there, and it's depending on each person's individual situation, can be a good option.
Yeah, and I guess another stat, back on the impacts of student debt
Mhm.
on career decisions. It says 32% of the graduates planning to enter private practice immediately after graduation chose to join a DSO affiliated practice.
Mhm.
A lot of times they're providing some, as part of their
Student loan
benefits, the
repayment.
student loan repayments.
Sure.
That's a really good, carrot.
Incentive.
Yeah.
Yep.
Incentive to host in front of them. So that's another trend, moving people away from the owning a private practice versus working for a larger organization.
Right.
And it says, 32%, right? That's almost double the 18% who chose DSOs in 2019. So that shows
Pretty big shift.
Yeah,
5 years,
that's a real big shift. And it says, the debt burden is linked to the appeal of that salary security that they provide. Let's kind of pivot a little bit and, kind of mention this here and there, but how about just credit in general? So we're going to move away from student loans and other credit. You mentioned, you bought a house recently, and I mentioned my views on it, but do you view the two types of debt differently? What other experience, in debt? Because, credit cards could also be
Yeah.
a big one.
So, for student loan debt, I had always kind of heard that that is good debt because it's providing you with a means to increase your income to then pay off that debt.
Yeah.
Um, Credit card debt, I've always been leery of. Like I've
Mhm.
always been kind of worried about that. Just because the interest rates are so high.
Yeah.
Like a student loan debt repayment, I think when I was getting mine done, it was somewhere around 4%.
Yeah. Which is not
Um,
bad.
yeah, not bad. And but then you look at credit card repayments, and if you're outside of the grace period, that like 1 month, or your APR 12 months, whatever it is, that goes up to like 36, 38% sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's just a very it's a quick way to have things get out of control. Um,
But you're probably approached on campus by credit card companies, right?
I get things all the time
Yeah.
from credit card companies. Like that's, I mean, I'm estimating. Most statistics are made up, but
Yeah.
but if I'm estimating, I'd say
Once a day.
probably,
Yeah.
well, yeah, it's probably like of the mail that I get, probably 50 to 60% is junk mail.
Yeah.
And of that junk mail, probably 25 to 30, 40% of that are credit cards that I didn't ask for.
Yeah. And did you get approached, like, did you have like credit card people on campus
Um,
as you were walking around, or did
Not in
Chapel
dental
Hill
school. I
yeah.
feel like when I was an undergrad, I may have seen some things at like some different fairs, but not in dental school.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was my experience. Like, I think schools have stopped allowing them. Literally, it'd be a
Good.
table as you walk in.
They're just taking
It's like,
advantage of kids.
yeah. To your point, it's like credit cards can range from 12 to, in the 30s, and that depends on your credit score.
Right.
And it says, so like a lot of, it is important. We can do a whole episode on credit score, but like it is important to start getting credit. But it can really get out of hand when it's, when it's credit card debt. Because if you, especially if you don't pay that off, right? And if you don't pay, that's just the interest rate. Like, let's say you miss a payment,
Yep.
right? Drops your credit score. So here's another stat. Young adults 18 to 29 tend to have a lower credit score compared to older groups.
Yep.
The average credit score for this age group is around 660. The average credit card debt for young adults is approximately $3,280. So that means consistently outstanding debt.
Yeah.
So they're not paying off the total amount of their credit card debts.
Mhm.
So they're paying that large interest rate.
Right.
So that is a dangerous thing, especially if you don't understand it.
Right. And just again, fortunately, when I was growing up, my dad had foresight, and he tried to set my brother and I up well. I'm saying my dad and my mom, both of them, had foresight and tried to set my brother and I up for success. And so I remember being in high school, and my dad giving me a credit card specifically only to pay for gas with. And the way that worked is, I can't remember if I was paying much on it or not, but essentially my parents would make sure that there was no balance on that at the end of the month,
Yeah.
so that it started to build credit for me slowly over time. And to your point before, that number ends up being significant when you go to purchase other things. So like if and some of
Finance a
these
car.
finance car, exactly. And some
Buy your
of these
first house.
things are like, they're outside of your control. Like if you don't have the support, if you don't have the means, and you're doing the best you can, and that requires you to use credit cards to make ends meet, then this is by no means meant to be critical of that in any way, shape, or form. um it's just, we want people to be aware, if they're not aware, the way that spending on a credit card in ways that are not necessary and that you're not going to be able to repay in a timely manner, um, just it has far-reaching effects on your ability to participate in things like, car purchasing or home ownership down the road.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many other things that people look at credit scores, right? Like it's weird where it pops up. Like some job applicants look at credit score.
Really?
Yeah. Which is interesting.
Apartments.
Yeah.
Live somewhere.
Apartments. Yeah.
Just rent even.
That's a common one. We're getting closer to the end. I wanted to mention one thing. We were looking at this the other day, thinking about, we talked about refinancing student loans and the pluses and minuses. We talked about paying off your student loans instead of investing. But the one thing we heard recently, which kind of blew both our minds, is that people are now helping fund their college or pay off their student loans by GoFundMe accounts.
Yeah.
So we were like, what? That's a thing? Which it was bizarre to both of us, but we Googled it.
If you're an early adopter, an early listener, that's a gem for you. You can go start your own GoFundMe and people will probably give you money to get through your education.
Yeah. And, as we were looking at that, there's a bunch of people who actually did that and like shared their journey. There's, I forget the name of the company, but there's also a way for people to invest in, professional student debt.
Yeah. I've seen that. That seems a little.
I don't have any experience there, so I don't have any details, but I mean, there's so much I guess the point is there's so much out there. And, that you mentioned this, if you didn't have your parents talk to you about it,
mm-hmm.
You didn't learn it in high school, you didn't learn it in undergrad, just financial literacy.
Yeah.
At least most people didn't. I know they're doing a better job in like high school, middle school, high school, some undergrad programs, dental schools vary, but, most of us, unless our parents taught us, we didn't graduate with a basics in financial literacy.
Yeah.
We had to teach ourselves.
I know more about chlorophyll, xylem, and phloem than I did about personal finance coming out of school.
Yeah. Yeah. And so all this stuff can be very scary, right? Like, and who do you ask? Do you want to go talk to a financial planner? Right. Which, by the way, you can, as a young dentist, we have a structure that makes it work. A lot of, financial advisors are out there that don't require a minimum asset level and do it kind of as consulting. There's there's information online, but that can be dangerous. It can be a rabbit hole, right? Like what's the right information? So personalized advice and having somebody to talk to, I think is key, right? So, for all the people listening, watching, like just find a trusted resource to ask these questions. Don't be afraid to admit you don't know something, right? No question is a dumb question.
Right. Talk to your friends.
They're
going through the same thing.
There's somebody else out there that has that same question and are really glad you asked it, especially if it's in a group setting. The advice is out there. Be careful asking peer groups and friends and going off that advice, because it kind of is an echo chamber. So I've seen that backfire a lot. It like works for one person, so then everybody thinks it'll work for them.
The thing that I've heard only a couple of people, so I don't know how big of a pitfall this is for most people. But hiring like family friends. I've had a few people tell me that they were looking for an accountant or something like that, and they had a family friend say, "Oh, you should let so-and-so's, so-and-so's nephew do it." Yeah, exactly. Which, Johnny might be great at it. Yeah. He might be the man. He might save you all the money in the world. But if you don't know how to vet that person, if you don't know exactly what their experience is, and you also don't know what you're looking for, then we're in a situation where you're just hoping that they know what they're doing, and we're hoping that they're doing things that are in your best interest.
Yeah, and that's a good point. We're also, have plans to do an episode on hiring a financial planner. We could do a whole separate episode on hiring, a tax, accounting, bookkeeping professional. So, because you really need to know that person, and I recommend having somebody who understands dental. It just helps with the education when you can talk the language of the person that you're talking to. But we'll do a whole episode on what to do, what to look out for. For everybody listening or watching, feel free to comment. And if you have a thought around something you want to learn more of, reach out and post. But, we're getting close to time. And, I think we could go, we could cover this for all day, but nobody wants to hear it that long. So as we wrap up, the key here is just to understand. Like, I hope Jackson's story made you feel like you're not alone. And it's a very complicated and emotional. Debt is very emotional. And it's one, my viewpoint on not worrying about student loans and not worrying about mortgages is not you need to be comfortable with your plan.
Not one size fits all.
Yeah. That's just my point of view. That's why it's important to talk to somebody who understands it and is giving you, strategies, not solutions. Like, the person you're working with should be a guide, should walk you through what you want to do. Nobody should be giving you a plan and saying, this is going to work for you. You should decide what plan is right for you. And whoever it is, an accountant, a CPA, an advisor, should just be the guide, just helping you along to solve your problems. Any thoughts on that?
I think that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you. I think, I think we got to approach these things from the perspective of collaboration, kind of teamwork. But yeah, I think having someone who can guide you through these things that you're working with, who, to your point, is not telling you what you have to do.
Yeah.
That's actually listening to what your goals are and what your hurdles are at the moment, and understands the emotional part of these things too, so that they can do the best job, do the best of their ability, guide you through these.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, please subscribe to this podcast. It'll be available on all channels.
Wherever podcasts are found.
Yeah, wherever podcasts are available. And we're going to continue to do more episodes on all things finance and life, how to live a fulfilling life as a dentist. So it could be finance adjacent. Follow us on social media for updates and additional resources. Follow Jackson. Follow Navapath Financial on all the places. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. And again, send us topics, questions, anything you think would be interesting, and we'll add it to the list. So thank you very much for joining the Oral Wealth Prosperity and Practice podcast. See you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Take care of yourselves.